Hey everyone! If you're a fan of the show, please head over to mikeyop.com and click the subscribe button. It's the best way to support us, and it's free. That's mikeyOPP.com. Thanks!
Hi, I'm Mike Oppenheim, and you're listening to Coffin Talk, Exit Interviews with the Living, a weekly podcast that explores how our views on death affect the way we live our life. This week, I'm very lucky to have my second international guest, all the way from London, UK, is Danny. We're going to leave his last name off for this one, and he's originally from Miami, Florida, so you can expect a interesting interview with an expatriate / maybe returning patriot. Danny, how are you doing?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
I'm very excited to have you. You're a very, very good friend of my wife, and I met you for the first time at our wedding, and you were just instantly charismatic and awesome. So.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I am excited to hear your thoughts on life and death, and I know just only one thing about you that you told me in a pre-interview, which I'll probably bring up. But for now, actually, let's just get to know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your age. I already said you grew up in Miami, and what generation do you think you belong to?
That's a tough one. You know what? When I tell people what generation I am, there's meant to be a zennial, which is something between is it zennial? I might get confused. There's like a micro generation between that's not quite a millennial, but like we're like the generation that grew up and got the first cell phones. We had like the first like the first kind of PlayStation games and all of that. But so we remember that we got the internet while we were in high school, and we also like the economy sunk while we finished college. So I think we're kind of a different breed than millennials, but we're not quite like the generation above us.
Yeah, and actually, I totally subscribe to that. So
yeah, I think it's like a weird 5 or 6 year generation, whatever it's called. I think it is anyway.
What brought you to London, and how long have you been there?
I've been in London 11 years in July. I know it's a long time. I can't even believe it myself. I can't even believe I've been alive this long sometimes. What brought me here, to be honest, like a sense of adventure, really. I got a job when I was living in San Francisco for a couple years, and I spent a whole year unemployed. And then after that, I got a job in New York, and then through that job somehow managed to get a job in London. And once I landed here, there's just a lot of work for what I do here, and I just kind of stayed. But yeah, kind of the idea of not having a job sort of brought me here in a way, and it's weirdly like kept me here because the industry's grown so much while I've been here.
Real quick, what industry is that?
I work in visual effects for film.
Oh, wow, that's exciting. So you definitely are an adventurous person, and you don't strike me as a workaholic, which I want to make very clear. It's not that you strike me as a slacker or somebody who doesn't like work, but you don't seem like someone who is driven by the pursuit of work for the sake of work. Is that accurate, or am I misreading it?
Oh, no, I hate working. But I do work hard, so I kind of have like I kind of have a funny relationship within it, and sometimes I like try and unpick it myself, but if I unpick it too much, it makes me not so good at my job sometimes.
Well, I hope this doesn't ruin your job then, because that's kind of the design of this podcast is to pick apart decisions like that. So where do you think that came from? I mean, because the way you described it, I felt an instant connection. I too don't know what to do when I'm out of work. I feel like, actually, I saw a funny meme today. It said, I don't know what's worse, having a job or not having a job.
Not having a job is far worse. Yeah, I'm way too, like, there's too much going on in my head, so I do need some structure and routine and something. I need a project. I need like a higher purpose. So I do in the end enjoy working, or like just having tasks and things to manage and that. But like the stress of it and all that, like I kind of, I'm not that big a fan of, but somehow I seem to bring it on myself. Yeah, it's a weird relationship I have with work. But if you were to ask me, do I enjoy working? I would say enough. Enough, yeah.
And that's a good answer. And what I want to follow it up with is kind of those thoughts that are in your head, because I have many thoughts. Are they like disorganized, anxious thoughts? Or are they just thoughts? Like what's the pattern of thinking that starts to overtake you if you don't have structure?
Interesting. So that happened to me. So I was basically getting paid to not do anything like over this winter lockdown before I changed jobs. And I was like, I basically got cabin fever. Like for 2 months, I really couldn't leave the house, and everything was just like closed. So, um, I just start to like, I just start to look for things, like look for like basically. I think this is what happens to old people. Like when you don't have things to do, you don't have a higher purpose. You don't have just a purpose. Like you start looking for purpose, so you start stirring up things, and just like it's almost like picking at things, like picking at scabs. So there is some anxiety to it, but it's mostly just, where I think your brain's meant to work, and if it's not being put to like to function in some sort of way, then you look for that in other ways that maybe not as healthy.
Yeah, and actually, I'm starting to see exactly what it was that I instantly connected with you when I met you over a year ago. And it's this side of you, this like awareness of the awareness. And it's my favorite thing about being a human because it like blows my mind and keeps me awake at night and annoys the hell out of me because I don't think I'll ever figure it out. But what to you is like the higher purpose of your life? Have you discovered that yet? Do you know that yet?
Um, no, I'll be honest. I don't know what my higher purpose is yet, but I know that I am on the path to like I guess it's not like a path, but it's more just like I think that in I think life is about maintaining a balance, and I think if you maintain that balance, good things come to you because you just have a good vibe about you, and then you kind of that energy sort of like emanates from you, and then good things come from you. So I really believe in all of in those kind of cycles, whether or not like I have a a like some sort of individual purpose. I haven't really found that yet, like, to be honest. But I do think that um I think there's things that I still want to have that will make me whole. But in overall, like, I think I'm a pretty simple person in like what I want to get out of life. I like to have fun. I like to travel. I want to fall in love. All those things. I don't really like being a parent or something. I've kind of sort of I haven't really made up my mind about, and it would really depend on my partner. But just those are the things that those are kind of like the bucket lists, and like just having those things I think would make just elevate my life. But whether or not like I'm you know I fit into some sort of like pattern that is like intelligent beings put together, I don't really think that's the case, no.
Well, that was a great answer, and it leads me to the obvious next question, which is: were you raised with any sort of organized religion? Slash, do you have currently any sort of organization to your spirituality?
You know, no, yes, I was raised Catholic. And I am spiritual, but I don't have an organized spiritual like like sense, I guess is what I would call it. Like I don't believe in organized religion, but I am a spiritual person, and how I go about my life and how I treat people and the decision making that I do and all that kind of plays into that, how I feel, and things I've learned, and my awareness of people. And I think all of that is in itself is kind of like it's a religion. I think there's things that Catholicism has taught me, but like there's just Judaic Christian beliefs are, in essence, if you boil them down, like they're very similar. And those are the things that kind of have stayed with me. Like I don't believe that if I don't follow those, I'll commit sin always. But am I the best person I can be? Probably not. So that's kind of how I go about it.
That's fascinating. So you're kind of getting into the nitty gritty of the specific question on this podcast, which is what do you think happens when you die? So I want to ask you that outright, but then I want to support it with a few other thoughts, which is uh, what do you think happens when you die is the question, but if you can you relate experiences along the way that led you to that conclusion, if you even have one?
I do have one, actually. I have a very interesting one.
Okay, awesome. Great.
Yeah, which is why I agreed to do this. So I actually have experienced the act of like I have actually wholly believed that I was dying. I had a very terrible experience when I was 15 years old on an LSD trip. At the first time I did LSD, I went to go see The Matrix, and I lost my mind. Um, yeah, so I ended up, yeah, at some point through that evening, I'll spare you the details because they're kind of humiliating. But like the what I did learn from that night, well, what the experience that I had was that I wholly believed that I was dying and that like something had happened to me and that I was like transcending into some other realm, or I had like these ideas of like God on the cross. At some point I also thought I was like God, which is, I don't even know where that came from because I don't really believe that, but like these kind of like symbols and archetypes and things that like your brain like like sort of sorts but were coming back to me, and they were trying to draw meaning from like something that I really believed was happening to me. Obviously it didn't die. I was, I thankfully, like, the acid kind of wore off, and I came around. But yeah, the experience of really believing you're going to die is very, very frightening, and the thoughts that come to you, and how you want to leave, what your legacy, especially when you're 15, is it really changes you. And I think that experience, um, it didn't necessarily like it didn't inform me about life after death, but it did change my way of thinking and how I approached life, and I became very, very curious about life and people, and just like there was something stayed with me that like I couldn't really, for many years, like it basically like began this it began to like a process that like I didn't really um it didn't really come to, because it still hasn't really concluded, but it didn't come to a better place or like find some sort of resolution until I was maybe 23, and I did ayahuasca. Yeah, so I had another experience, and this one it was a lot clearer, where I saw the beginning and end of like my life in a way, but like I couldn't describe the end because I couldn't tell you exactly what was happening to me, but like I saw it very clearly as this like series of like images, and people, um and faces and things that were just like kind of morphing in this like very cosmic experience that I had. And from that, it's not so much that what I don't know how to describe a trip like that. It's not so much that it's almost like my brain intuitively found peace, like it connected to something that was be like bigger than me, but nothing, not intelligent bigger than me, but like just like something that I was a part of already. And like that's what I always tell people, is like I call it like life, I guess. I don't know, just like like whatever the life force is, whatever that thing is that we all see in plants or people. I don't know. Yeah, and whatever that was, really, it helped calm a lot of things in me that were like I had really anxious kind of way between like, yeah, my adolescence and my early like 20s, where I was really unsure of myself. I was like not out. Then I finally came out. I just, yeah, it felt like things were just going to be okay. And whether or not like that, how what I think happens after death, I'm not quite sure, but I'm not so worried about it anymore.
Are you not so worried, or are you just not worried?
I mean, if I were to be, if you were to tell me that my life was, going to end soon, and obviously that would, create, a series of processes in my head again. But like, I'm not, I, I think that things don't ever really end. Things are just kind of like on a cycle. It's this it's a theory. It's called a theory of like eternal return. It's Nietzsche wrote about it, and it's just that like things that have existed will continue to exist and will continue to happen in maybe a series of different combinations. But you'll maybe it won't be me, but somebody like me will exist someday and affect people in the same way, in a or in similar ways, and like those reactions just will continue to exist. Um, and that's kind of that's sort of like at the core of my belief system, is that we're just part of like some sort of cycle.
That was an incredibly profound and oddly coherent explanation of an incoherent experience.
Is it? I feel like I rambled.
No, you didn't, and it was actually very coherent because I've heard multiple people relate their experiences on not only this podcast but just, you know, all the conversations you have growing up, and it's like you're trying to describe like that undescribable, the indescribable, the sublime slash like all this stuff, but it was like your take gelled and made sense to me, and it made me feel the piece briefly that you're talking about, which was very exhilarating actually, because I think there's something to that. And we were talking about higher purposes, and at some point I've kind of realized that I don't know mine either, but I do know that this podcast, like you said, just feels right, like this pursuit of people's experiences. And so yours really relates to me because you mentioned a lot of things, but it was like bookended at 15 and 23. And then it seems like you've almost like took on this personality and this role of like being there for other people who might be on the journey. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and I do think I am that person to people that, I mean, open up. Yeah, and people do open up to me easily, probably because I kind of, I guess there is some wisdom to that. Like, I don't know, but there's also just like a feeling that like things are just gonna be okay, and like you just kind of have to step back sometimes. And like I was saying, like my relationship with work and all that, it's like it's kind of like a necessary evil, but like at times you have to just be like, well, there's more to this.
Yeah. Well, that difficult transformation of identity and identity formation, especially in your early 20s, I mean, we all go through it. And especially when you related your generation, I'm in the same group. And like, I feel like that those identity politics and identity formation are like so weird in our generation because we're really between like these like social orders. And, I'm watching the degeneration of like certain social values, and I don't mind them, but it's like weird to watch them go.
Yeah, I wonder the same. Like these kids like don't even speak to each other. It's just all over screens, and like I just wonder if our parents thought the same when we were just playing video games. I don't know, just in a different way that maybe it was alien to them in a way they couldn't understand. But like I think, like I don't know. I think it's what's happening now. It's pretty dark, to be honest.
Well, yeah, no, it is, and it's strange. And I'm actually not on this podcast because it'll get too like nitpicky, but I am curious how it feels in the UK versus here, because we're so like contemporary and alongside each other, but we're not the same at all. I mean, I've been there enough times to see that. So, but I do want to circle back because you mentioned like when you do something, you can feel good or bad, and like there was a tinge of not morality to it, like you weren't expressing your morality. But I am curious if in these experiences of ayahuasca and acid, and then just also your own brilliant mind, do you have a feeling that there is such a thing as a bad action versus a good action?
um, yeah, I think there definitely is like inherent good and like inherently bad things you can do. I mean, there's a lot of gray in between. Um, yeah, for sure.
And so do you feel like threatened, coerced, or compelled one way or another to like behave differently and to behave quote unquote better with those experiences, without those experiences, just in general?
I think, like I'll be the first to say I'm not like a goody two shoes. I never have been. I never will be. Like I bend the rules. I'm a bit cheeky. So I like to have fun with it. I don't yeah, I don't think it makes me a bad person, but I think that when you behave in ways that make you feel good or reaffirm that feeling of good, you just you just I guess you just feel more at peace with yourself, and that in itself creates like a biological change in how you behave and how you relate to people and all that. So if you do something that you probably know isn't great and you have some guilt from that because you weren't the best version that you think of yourself, then that also has a negative impact because you carry some form of guilt. I don't know if that works. That might just be me and my Christian background maybe, but yeah.
No, I mean that gels with me, but at the same time, I would worry then, specifically with your case, if you were raised Catholic and you're gay, and then you realize you are, there has to be a moment of like, wait, which one is which? Am I immoral and they're right, or am I just fine and they're not, or is there a hybrid? Did that occur to you at all, or?
Yeah, and that's the thing is that like I do so like when I my first year in college, I took this anthrobiological course, and it also changed my mind. It was the first time I was able to just kind of see us as just, the animals that we are. And also just like I've always liked science, and just things like um so part of like my degree and like in what I studied was at my last year, my senior seminar, I wrote a paper on just homosexuality and its like genetic components, just to really just to almost to prove to myself that like I was who I was because it wasn't really up to me. It was actually just that's just how I am, Um, yeah, and I think that that kind of reaffirmed that to me. Like I do have like I guess where I'm going with this is I have like I do think of human beings in biological terms, and I do think that when people have imbalances or there are hormonal imbalances or just even if you're I mean homosexuality is a hormonal change or diversion as you're developing in the brain, that is probably maybe different than the majority of what happens to populations, but it's not anything like it's not good or bad. It's just a minority, you know.
Yeah, totally. No, that really makes sense. Do you feel like we, and I mean the Western valued culture, do you feel like we're working towards that, or we're already there, or like where do you think we as moralistic humans are with the bio versus choice, all that?
I think that yeah, definitely Western society has embraced that for sure. I mean, here and in the States, I do think. I mean, I wish sometimes it was. Nowadays it's so easy to be gay. When I was younger, it was a lot harder. But I definitely do feel privileged because I feel like I've gotten some of those benefits too. Like it was early enough for me to just make my life easy enough.
And so, kind of switching gears, but a similar topic. I can tell that you're inspirational to people probably even older than you and your own age, but especially people younger, just because you have that warmth and that guiding. And you said people confide in you. Do you ever recommend that people try ayahuasca or LSD?
All the time. Well, LSD is really harsh. Like I think LSD is like yeah. I mean, I don't know if I'd even do LSD again. It's just a really intense drug. But I did it a lot when I was younger. Ayahuasca is probably more intense, but in a different way. And because it's like, there's like a ceremonial aspect to it. Um, it's different, and it's also I mean you ayahuasca you basically trip on the chemical that you release from your brain as you die. So those experiences are very like your body goes through a biological experience. It's very similar to what happens to you when you die, and that chemical exists in all of life. So whatever that chemical is like it carries whatever I'm trying to explain, and that's what I really believe.
That's so profound, yeah. And I have also done ayahuasca, and I agree with every single thing you said. And it's weird because I'm reticent. I don't know if that's right, reticent to recommend it to people only because just the look of like, wait, what are you saying? That's crazy. And also, people do group it with LSD and other drugs, and I don't think it's. I even venture to say it's not a drug because of what you said. It's a chemical that we already have. But with that said, do you feel like you're gonna ever have to use it again, or do you feel like you're now on a course that you could, but you don't need it?
Oh no, yeah, for sure. I'm thinking of doing it in November again, actually, but I haven't done it in a while. Yeah, I think it's like a good reset. Like it's not something you want to do all the time because I think too much of anything is bad, and that's like something, that like it's true for a reason. And like if you dig too deep, like you're you can also drive yourself crazy with things like that. Like there's no such thing as like being like or like pure, or I don't know, some people that get really into doing that. Like I don't know, I mean, it's just not what I'm going with it. But I do think there's like a cleansing and like a cathartic experience that comes with it, and it offers like a reset, really. yeah, so now and then for sure. I think I'll do it, a few times in my life, maybe, maybe every few years or something.
Yeah, very cool. And I had no expectation when I asked, but I'm always curious because we're very like-minded and we're both on a path that we have no idea what the hell it is, but we're on it and we at least feel confident in that. And so I'm actually looking for camaraderie in this and I'm getting it from you. So I kind of want to know, as my last question probably, I'm curious, how did the experience of lockdown and COVID really deeply affect you? Like philosophically, morally, like alongside all these other conversations we just had, how did COVID specifically and the lockdown specifically relate to you?
Um, you know, COVID, like to be honest, the last year was not that difficult for me, like in the sense that like I could have had it a lot worse. I was very, very lucky. The last very end bit of like the lockdown this winter was difficult for me just because like I said, I didn't have much to do, even though I was getting paid to work. Um and in those days, like in that period, I just found, that like I guess I don't know. I mean, I wasn't working, but I also didn't want to work, so I was just kind of I just you start to like really like look within you and say, well, you start looking for purposes in life, and you start to just see the things that you don't have. So in a way, funny enough, while I wasn't working, I wanted to go back to work, but I also had this dilemma where it's like, well, yeah, but you're working too much before. So it's just, again, like I said, I want to have a life where I'm still able to pursue the things that I think are missing, or I think would lead to a more fulfilling life. But continue to advance in my career. I don't think that's something that I want to leave. So I think that was like it did kind of um, it's strengthened, I guess, that idea. Because sometimes I thought maybe like I'd just quit my job and do something a bit more relaxed and maybe live on a beach somewhere. But I don't think that's for me. I spent some time in Tulum in January, and like that whole vibe, it's really fun for a bit, but then you also just like it's just not reality. And I think for me, like, there is something about a career and that drive, and the sense of accomplishment when you finish a project, and that sense that gives you, I don't know, it gives you a sense of pride, purpose, all those things. And like those are the things that you just, as a person, find rewarding, and are just a few of the things that make your life fulfilling.
Wow, I'm so fascinated by your take on everything, and I really love the way you express the joy of just like living life and finding fun. I have not heard anyone so far express it the way you have.
Oh, I love fun. I mean, I somehow have managed to stay. I've got a very like young attitude about things, and I think I don't know. Maybe it's my personality, or just I don't really take myself that seriously. But yeah, I do. It keeps you young, and it also just keeps you just sane. There's just a lot of madness these days. We've lived madness this last year.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And I think that's a perfect note to end this particular podcast on. So, Danny from London recently and from originally Miami, thank you so much for helping us put another nail in the coffin. Once again, my name is Mike Oppenheim, and you have been listening to Coffin Talk, exit interviews with the living, and we will see you soon. When I hear this song and I'm walking alone.